Hello and welcome into the backfield. I'm your host Connor Schaff, and today I will be giving you my Week 13 college football top 25 committee ranking projections. This was another great week of college football. We had a couple of massive games. We had Oklahoma upsetting Alabama in Alabama. We had Georgia taking care of business against Texas. We had some other crazy matchups, but I think those are kind of the big two. Pittsburgh gets crushed by Notre Dame. We had some games that were very close to being upsets. Texas A&M. We had Georgia Tech almost getting upset. We'll talk about all of that in just a moment, but I want to go ahead and get right into this. So let's get started with going over the selection committee criteria. Now, I'm not going to go too detailed into this just because I went over this in the first video, and at this point you guys should probably be getting the idea based on what the committee are doing, what their criteria is. But really, the committee uses mostly things like strength of schedule, head-to-head result, strength of record, a lot of this analytical data, while also using a bit of that head-to-head. And what I think we've noticed over the last couple of weeks is that head-to-head is not the end-all be-all, and the eye test is a lot more important than what the committee criteria on their website gives credit for. So how we are going to do these rankings is the same way that the committee do to an extent. I'm not going to go through 13 rounds of voting all by myself. That would be pretty sad. But what we will do is we will do what the committee does to make their initial top 25. And that is the committee goes through and ranks every single team that they think should be considered for the top 25 and then narrows that down to 25 teams. So we will go conference by conference and name the teams that I think will be considered for the top 25 rankings, starting with the American Conference. And we are now down to 3. South Florida loses to Navy this week, and now we just have 3 teams that I think have a chance of being ranked, that being Tulane, Memphis, and North Texas. And I really think it's only 2. I'd be quite surprised to see Memphis in much of the conversation, but as a 2-loss team with a win over a Power 4 team, that's why I have them here but not Navy. Then I do think that they'll at least be somewhat considered. At the end of the day, I get that Arkansas is one of the worst teams in the SEC, if not the worst, but every single team in the SEC and the Big Ten are good teams, maybe outside of Purdue. But at the end of the day, every single team in those 2 conferences are quality teams, and they are just generally beating up on each other. But so I think that these are the 3 teams that are really still in the race to be ranked in the American. Moving on to the ACC, we have a bit of a change up here, as Pittsburgh I do not think is in any more consideration to be ranked at this point. They are 7-3 now, but they got absolutely crushed at home by Notre Dame. And I get Notre Dame are a good team, but they do not have a single win over a team with a above 500 record, so I just don't see how the committee could even consider them. But we do have Virginia, Georgia Tech, Miami, Louisville, who does also lose this past week, SMU, and Wake Forest. Obviously, Louisville and SMU are both holding their head up on the fact that they have wins over Miami. Wake Forest actually has a win over SMU, so that's a pretty good win for them. But Wake Forest also sitting here at 7-3. I do think they'll at least be in the initial conversations. Then we have the Big 12, where we're down to 5 teams. I will say I'm recording this during the BYU TCU game, but it's at halftime and BYU have a 17-point lead. So I think BYU will be pretty comfortable in that game. But we also have Houston, Utah, Texas Tech, and Arizona State. We had Cincinnati on here as well last year, and Cincinnati were even ranked last week, which is actually pretty surprising to me. But I think with Cincinnati losing to Arizona at home, I don't think they'll really be considered anymore. Arizona is another 7-3 team. I just don't think they have the quality of wins that some of these teams like Arizona State have. Now we have the Big Ten, and we still have the same 9 teams that are in consideration to be ranked. We have Indiana, Illinois, Ohio State, Iowa, USC, Oregon, Nebraska, Washington, and Michigan. Yes, Iowa has 4 losses, but given that the committee already had them at 21, even with 3 losses, a loss on the road to USC in pouring rain is not going to do too much to detriment them. And I will say, I don't have them ranked, just as a spoiler, in these rankings that I think the committee will do. But I think there's at least a small chance that the committee still rank them, especially with how difficult I think it'll be to rank these lower teams. Then in the SEC, we also still have the same 9 teams. We have Texas, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and Missouri. I don't think there's anything too surprising there. It's just every 3-loss or better team in the SEC. And then we have the others, where we're now down to 2 after San Diego State lost. Last week, I did record last week's video prior to San Diego State's loss, so we still had them in consideration, but now they really have no chance. And we have Notre Dame and James Madison with only 1 loss. And now, before I reveal my top 25 rankings, I do want to talk a little bit about something here, because in my personal opinion, I find the top 15 very easy to predict. I'm almost certain that I know what the top 15 is going to look like, maybe with a couple little shifts here and there. But once we get to 16, I have no idea what the committee is going to do. 16 through 19 is very difficult. I am almost certain I know who is going to be at 20, because there's a very clear tier break team that we've been seeing in the top 25 the last few weeks. I'm sure you can think of who that is. And then 21 through 25, I think we're probably going to see 5 new teams in the rankings, so it'll be very interesting to see what the committee will do. But I'll give you my best guess, starting with 21 through 25. And I'll be honest with you, I actually had James Madison in these rankings and at 24. And I know you look at this and say, how could the committee not put a 9-1 James Madison team in the top 25? And then you look at their resume, and they have nothing on their resume. And obviously their 1 loss is to Louisville, who I don't think is going to be ranked this week either. So it is really tough to make an argument for them to be ranked. And when I look at 2 weeks ago, in the original rankings, when Memphis, despite only having 1 loss and having that win over Arkansas that we talked about before, as well as having a win over USF that looked really good at the time, the committee still did not rank Memphis. So clearly the committee does not care if you have 1 loss as a group of 5 team, unless you have something better to show of it. And I just don't think James Madison do. So instead we have SMU here. SMU have the big win over Miami. They do have a couple of not so great losses to TCU and Baylor, but they do still have a fairly decent resume, and they are very much in the race for the ACC championship. Now, they don't control their destiny, but I gotta be honest, I really trust this team in a make it or break it scenario in the ACC, especially given their experience from last year, when not a lot of other teams have this luxury like SMU do. At 24, we have North Texas, so I do still have 1 group of 5 team ranked here, and the reason why they're ranked, but James Madison isn't, is because they have a win over Washington State, which I think is a better win than anything that James Madison has by far. Remember, Washington State was moments away from upsetting both Ole Miss and Virginia. I feel like they took Virginia to overtime. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I do think that this North Texas team has a win to at least show the committee that they have something. While I don't think James Madison has a single win that they can go to the committee and say, we have this win. They also do have a win over Navy, who is an 8-2 team, or a 7-2 team. I don't quite remember. I think 8-2. But that's another win that I think is very good looking for North Texas, especially after Navy's win over South Florida. At number 23, we have Nebraska moving into the rankings. Nebraska, I I want to say that they did not play this week, and they are kind of just riding the high of kind of doing what they're supposed to. They are a 7-3 Big Ten team. Obviously, there are a couple of other 7-3 Big Ten teams in Washington and Illinois, but you think Washington now is a loss to Wisconsin, which looks really, really bad. And then Illinois, they don't have any awful losses. Their losses are to Washington and then to Ohio State and Indiana. Both that Ohio State and that Indiana game, they did not look good at all in. Even the Washington game, they didn't look very good in. But I think the fact that they have the loss to Washington will keep them out, because how could you rank a 7-3 Illinois but not rank a 7-3 Washington? And I think that'll do some help to get Nebraska in these rankings, who has a win over Cincinnati, who has a couple of other okay wins. They have a 3-point loss to Michigan. Their really one bad loss is their loss to Minnesota, but even Minnesota looks like a decent team this year. So I definitely think that there is a very good chance Nebraska will be ranked. At 22, this is the third week in a row I've had them ranked, so we'll see if finally they will be ranked, and that is Arizona State. And I just really don't see the argument for why the committee doesn't have Arizona State in this top 25. Arizona State has a win over what I think has a very good chance to be a top 5 Texas Tech team. Obviously, their losses aren't great, and obviously Sam Leavitt is injured, but this is a very good football team. Clearly, they have the loss to Houston, they have the loss to Utah, but I really think that this team is decent, and I would be quite surprised if they're not ranked again. And then at 21, we have the other team that I had ranked in the top 25 last week and couldn't quite believe that they weren't ranked, and that Cincinnati was ranked instead. And that is Houston. Houston has a win over this Arizona State team, and honestly, this Houston team has just been consistently winning games. And in my personal opinion, I think the Big 12 is miles better of a conference this year than the ACC, and I think we should be rewarding Big 12 teams that have good records, like Houston at 8-2. It is not easy to get to 8-2 in the conference that they are in, and I do think that that should be rewarded, and I honestly think finally that will be rewarded, as a whole bunch of teams end up falling out of the top 25 due to losing. We now have 16 through 20, and this was the other thing that I found really difficult. So Tennessee comes here at 20. That might be the easiest ranking in the entire top 25. They move ahead of all the teams that lost, but they have no chance of moving any higher because they played New Mexico State. So yeah, Tennessee sits here at 20. And then we have these 4 teams: Georgia Tech, Michigan, Texas, and Virginia. And I'll go ahead and spoil number 15 as well. Number 15 is USC. So I actually have USC jumping Georgia Tech in the rankings and moving up to number 15. USC, they beat Iowa this week. Maybe it was a bit more difficult than you would hope being at home, but it was a tough situation to be playing in, and they did get the win. Comparatively, Georgia Tech was moments away from losing to Boston College. They did not play well at all, especially on the defensive side of the ball in that game. And Michigan had to take a game-winning field goal to beat Northwestern. So I kind of found it difficult to decide what to do with these teams. And I will tell you, originally, I had this as 16 Texas, 17 Virginia, 18 Georgia Tech, 19 Michigan. And in the end, I decided to go with closer to what the original rankings are. So I went Georgia Tech at 16. They're still a 9-1 team, and I think the committee will respect that. I definitely think the committee will be concerned about their recent form, but they are one win away from clinching an ACC championship spot. So I do still think they'll be here at 16, but it's tough to tell. Michigan, they do struggle quite a bit against Northwestern, but they did get the job done against a good Big Ten school. And that's why I think they'll stay here at 17. I don't think they're going to get jumped by anybody. Then we have Texas at 18. Obviously, Texas gets crushed by Georgia this week. But they do still have a win over an Oklahoma team that's looking better and better every week on a neutral field. I think that is a really, really good-looking win for Texas that will boost their resume. While Virginia doesn't have a win over a single top 25 team now that Louisville is no longer ranked. So it is tough with Virginia. I think they were by far the best performing team out of the four, especially in a game that pretty much knocked Duke out of having any ACC championship hopes. So it's just so difficult. I really didn't know what to do here, but I think the committee are going to prefer Texas over Virginia just because of the SEC bias. And I know people say SEC bias. It's kind of fair bias because obviously the SEC and Big Ten are miles better than the ACC. But I do feel bad for Virginia. I don't really think that they deserve to they really deserve to be this low after how they performed, but I think it's probably what's going to happen. So now let's calm down a little bit and move on to the part that's a little easier. Obviously, I said I have USC at 15. I'm pretty confident that they are going to jump Georgia Tech and move into the top 15. And this top 14 is very easy. Miami moves up a spot to 14. Vanderbilt moves up a spot to 13. Utah moves up a spot to 12. I forgot to change the name, but that is BYU that moves up to 11. Obviously, assuming that BYU doesn't fall apart against against TCU. Man, I am not on it at all today, but we'll keep trucking along. Just going through these teams, BYU, we're assuming they get the job done against TCU. Utah gets the job done this week against Baylor. Vanderbilt, I do not think that they played, but I do think their record should be 8-2. Miami, they took down NC State, and honestly, what was very impressive fashion. That was probably their best looking performance since week 1. So fair play to Miami. Then we have 6 through 10, and so I have Notre Dame here at 10. It kind of sucks for Notre Dame. You go on the road and beat a ranked team, but I actually have you dropping a spot because realistically, Pittsburgh is not a top 25 team in football. Alabama, on the other hand, is a top 10 to 15 team in football. And to go on the road and beat Alabama, obviously Oklahoma has to jump ahead of Notre Dame. That is a more impressive win by far than anything Notre Dame has. And then Alabama still has a win over top 5 Georgia, so I would be shocked if Notre Dame is ahead of Alabama, but it'll be interesting to see. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. The committee does love Notre Dame, because at this point, why on earth is Notre Dame ahead of Miami? Miami has the same record, has looked just as good recently, and there's just no... What is Notre Dame doing ahead of Miami? Like, head-to-head record has to mean something. Then we have Oregon here at 7 and Ole Miss here at 6. I'll be honest. So I got a lot of hate for mentioning that Oregon could be behind Notre Dame this past week. And obviously, Oregon won't be behind Notre Dame after this week. They also got the job done in their matchup against somebody that wasn't too difficult, Minnesota. Well, that's not an easy matchup by any means. Minnesota are a bowl team this year, but they played on Friday, and I didn't watch any of the game, to be honest with you, because who's watching football on Friday? Well, that's a total lie. I watch football most Fridays, but I was busy this Friday. So, yeah. Fair play if you did watch the game, though. Thumbs up. No, but, yeah. So, I'll be honest. I considered two things here. I considered Oregon jumping Ole Miss, because Ole Miss obviously plays it very close with Florida this week at home. I also considered moving Oregon behind Oklahoma. Here's the really difficult thing about where Oregon's at. Oregon are now, once again, they have 0 top 25 wins. Unless Iowa is shockingly ranked, which it would just be ridiculous if the committee ranks a 4-loss team. Like, please, just rank one of the 1-loss group of 5 teams. We want to see one of those teams ranked. But Oregon, they're sitting here at 9-1. They are obviously a very good team, but they just have nothing amazing on their resume. And then the one good teams they played, they lost to. And if you actually watched that Indiana-Oregon game, at Oregon, mind you, Indiana should have won that game by 28 points. It wasn't a close game. Fernando Mendoza made a couple mistakes throughout the game, and that's all that kept Oregon in the game. Outside of that, they just did not... They didn't play. They lost that game outright. And I think it's tough because realistically, like, what do you do with Oregon? They don't really play anybody else for the rest of the season. That's a huge... Well, that's a total lie. They actually play USC next weekend. That'll be their big test. And if USC wins that game, I'm not 100% sure a 10-2 Oregon would make the college football playoff. I think this might be the one team that at 10-2 and the SEC or Big Ten could miss out on the playoffs just because they go 10-2 with 0 ranked wins. How would you put them in over Miami at 10-2 when Miami has a win over Notre Dame that's basically a lock for the playoffs at this point? How do you have them in over Vanderbilt if they go 10-2? Who would have a win over Tennessee and a win over Missouri? And I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening with Oregon. Now, granted, I think that they're going to beat USC, so won't really matter. And then we'll have to stop having this discussion because I think Oregon's a good team. You think Oregon's a good team. Unless you disagree, feel free to disagree in the comments below. Explain to me why you don't think Oregon's a good team. And hopefully we can stop this conversation. Oregon can be a playoff team, and it'll be all done. But yeah, but that is 6 through 10, and now we have 1 through 5 here with Ohio State at 1, Indiana at 2, Indiana again apparently at 3 because I am dumb, Georgia at 4, and Texas Tech at 5. No, we have Texas A&M at 3 here. I apologize for the problems with the graphics this week. I get that I say this every week, but it is 12:30 at night, and I did just come back from playing 2.5 hours of pickleball, so yeah. I don't know, man. But yeah, so getting into these actual rankings, though, Texas Tech, I would be quite surprised to not see them in the top 5, especially with how poor Ole Miss played. How can Ole Miss possibly jump back ahead of Texas Tech? Texas Tech is just looking so good at the moment. Like, I honestly think there really should be an argument that Texas Tech should be ranked at 4. They have a unbelievable resume at this point, and they have wins over 2 top 15 teams at this point. I get that Georgia also has 2 top 10 wins, so I guess there really isn't actually a case, but yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about Texas A&M for a second, though. So I am a Texas A&M fan, for those of you guys who don't know, and oh my gosh, I was at halftime of this game, I just was like, oh my gosh, this is just what Texas A&M does. They are going to lose to South Carolina, lose to Texas in the final week, and miss out on the playoffs because they just don't really have anything to hold their head up high on their resume outside of Notre Dame. But the committee loves Notre Dame, so they would probably put Notre Dame in over Texas A&M anyways. And all of this stuff was going through my head, and I was on the verge of tears. No, I really wasn't. But for the story, I was on the verge of tears, and then Texas A&M comes out of the second half and gets a touchdown. And at that point, I knew Texas A&M was going to win that game. Then we go to 3 minutes left in the game, and Texas A&M makes maybe the worst call I've ever seen on the 1 yard line. And they call a trick play where the running back throws a screen pass to Marcel Reed, and shocker, keeping in mind this running back is a true freshman, and shocker, it's a turnover, and South Carolina gets the ball. Fortunately, Texas A&M's defense stepped up, got the job done, and Texas A&M won the game. But I don't even know what to say about that call. But yeah, and then we have Indiana here at 2. They get the job done against Wisconsin. We have Ohio State here at number 1. And that is it. That is my predictions for the committee's top 25 rankings this week. Make sure to let me know what your personal rankings are, as well as what you think the committee will do. Let me know where you agree and disagree with my rankings. Make sure to like and subscribe, and comment down below any thoughts you have. Make sure to interact with the video in any way you can. It all helps grow the channel. But hope you guys have a great rest of your day or night, because this video will be going up at 1 or 2 in the morning, or whatever time you end up watching the video, because I assume y'all won't be staying up that late. So have a good one, and bye.